Hey there, my name is Alex and welcome to my video on what I did to modify a Nerf Hail-Fire. Before I begin though, a quick disclaimer. When you modify Nerf blasters, it is at your own risk, so I will not take any responsibility for if you ruin your Hail-Fire or injure yourself in the process. You need to be 100% certain of what you're doing and safe at all times. Moving right along. This is the Hail-Fire, the latest blaster from Nerf, as part of their new N-Strike Elite series and is their flagship model for that range. It is an electronically powered blaster that uses flywheels to propel the darts out at a very high velocity, and it uses the existing clip system. It comes with some new Elite streamlined darts which are much more efficient than the old version, and on top of that, what makes this particular blaster more unique than other ones is the rotating ammo rack, which allows you to hold up to 8 clips at a time, but also it has a advancing handle so that you can rotate around from when your clip gets empty around to a fresh full one. However, not only myself but other people have found this very mechanism to be a problem. Hopefully what I'm about to cover in this video will help out for anyone who is willing and careful enough to modify it. Getting along to the actual problem at hand is that this entire mechanism used to be very, very wobbly. I didn't do a before video, so I can't show you that. But it used to be very wobbly to the point that even when you're moving around, if you've got too many or very large heavy clips or drums on it, it would just swivel and rotate and jiggle around way too much. It causes 3 issues with that. First of all, even just keeping them straight to feed into the flywheels to fire the dart. Often if it's not straight, it'll either hit the sides or the flanges of these clips, or the dart will sort of just push out and fall out rather than go through the barrel, or sometimes it'll get halfway and jam or nothing will happen at all. That's the first problem. The second problem is when you're actually advancing to rotate around to the next clip, it's got a special mechanism in there which is actually designed to prevent anything from breaking. When you try to rotate it either quickly or if you've got a lot of weight and momentum on there from lots or larger, heavier clips or magazines or drums, that actually causes a problem. So when you go to rotate it, it takes a long time to clip it forward, wait for it to stop rattling around and moving, clip it back, do it again. Because if you do it too quickly, or if there's too much weight and momentum on it, it will just slip and reset back to an empty clip, which is the last thing you need to happen in a Nerf battle. So reliability is not looking so good. The last problem that I have found is when you're trying to angle up with it, particularly again when you've got a lot of weight on it, this entire system here sags down just a couple of millimeters, not much, and it usually doesn't sound like enough to throw off any problems like this. But believe me when I say that what actually happens is when you pull the trigger and the pusher comes out to push the dart out, it only gets about halfway, and because it's on an angle, the dart pusher just sort of skims over it and will completely miss it, or in some cases it will just rub along the top of the dart, not really helping it get anywhere. So, I will hopefully show you not only how to get into this blaster to fix those issues, but also if you do undertake these mods and it works out, then hopefully you'll be able to find, just like I did with this one, how much more reliable and how much more awesome it becomes by doing so. Before I get into that, just a very quick heads up on what I did outside of those modifications. I did a voltage mod. It uses these Trustfire 14500 or AA size batteries. I did try using 16.8 volts or 4 batteries, but it seems to have a thermo resistor or something in it to prevent overheating, so by the time you get around to the 3rd or 4th clip, it'll just cut out, or, you know, I didn't get to this point, but if you modify it to take those out, more than likely you start melting the motors and it will make a funny smell and probably kill it. I have found by using 12.6 volts and a dummy battery spacer that I made myself, I'm not going to go into how to do that, look it up elsewhere, but by using 12.6 volts it seems to be efficient in terms of getting much more range and still retaining quite a bit of accuracy even for a flywheel blaster. So that was just a little mini mod I thought I'd mention that I used for this particular blaster. The first problem you're going to encounter is trying to open this up once you've actually assembled it, especially with these shell bits. Now, I'm not actually going to clip it on to show you, but I've taken them off for 2 reasons. First of all, to get into this, and secondly, I just like being able to see how many darts I've actually got left, which ones are empty, but also to remove them and make that a bit easier. So basically, these are normally clipped onto the top. The best way I have found to take them off is to apply pressure to the bottom here and here, and not only push out, but also on an angle and up, away like that. There's a little locking block there, and there's also two slots here and here, where two sort of angled clips on either side hook into it. So it is a little bit fiddly to get out, and that's why I'm not putting it back in to do that. But I tend to remove these for modification, not only because it makes it a bit problematic when you're trying to get them out of this slot, but also even if you do leave them on and you pull it apart, what will end up happening is the blaster will be sitting on an angle, and if you bump it, it'll roll over and cause a very big mess. So, that aside, the next hurdle you're going to get is the handle. When this is clipped together, it's pretty much a near permanent fixture. What you have to do is first take off the outer shell of this side of the handle, so that sort of comes away. To get in there, there's two little screw holes, one here and one here. You need to take them out with a small Phillips head screwdriver, and then this part will just quite nicely fall away. The trickiest part though is when this actually locks into place on here. It's got like a little arrowhead or a hammerhead tip, and that covers the top of these two flanges. You have to carefully pry them back and then pull that up and away from it. I'm not going to demonstrate that because I will be honest, it's probably not the best method of doing it, but it's the only way I've found to do it without cutting or literally breaking anything. So if you find an alternate method, let me know, I'd be interested. Otherwise, that's how I did it. I just pulled it away very carefully without snapping anything, and that will finally allow you to open up the blaster and get into the guts of it. Okay, so we've got the Hail-Fire opened up. I'll do a quick tour of the internals and point out a couple of optional mini-mods along the way, and then we'll finally get around to opening up and modifying the most important part, the rotating ammo rack system. However, we'll quickly start with this end. This is where all the trigger mechanisms are. This one controls the dart pusher, and this one controls the flywheels. This little white piece in here is a trigger lock. So essentially what happens is if you try and pull the main trigger, it gets in the way, push the flywheel trigger, and then it will allow you to fire freely. I'm leaving it in there because I tend to find if you accidentally push a dart in too soon, or if the flywheels aren't spinning, darts can get a little bit jammed in there and cause a bit of a headache. So for me personally, I'm leaving it in there, but if you're the kind of person who doesn't like locks or likes to be able to pull the trigger freely, then that's what you remove. Back up to the front with the flywheels. For this kind of mod, we actually don't need to open up any of this, which I haven't even worked out how to do yet. It's a pretty enclosed system, kind of reminds me of the barricade. However, there's two parts I will point up at this end. First of all, when you're reassembling the blaster, just make sure that the handle system slots evenly into these two sockets, otherwise it won't close back together. And in here, the little barrel that feeds into the flywheels, this bottom lip was a lot more prominent, a little bit more elevated. I sanded it down just to make dart feeding a little bit smoother and easier. A little optional mod that I haven't gotten around doing yet, but I'm considering it, is sanding off the right hand side nub. I guess you could do the left hand one just for symmetry, but the right hand one is basically when you're trying to rotate the ammo rack anti-clockwise to put a new clip into place. If a dart is too far forward as it's coming around, it tends to hit that little nub and can cause jam. So I'm going to play around with it a little bit more and see if it's absolutely necessary to get rid of it for convenience sake. But otherwise at this stage I haven't quite gotten around to that. But if you're finding that your darts keep moving forward a bit too much and getting caught on that, then that's what you need to take out. Up the top here we have the jam door, which also has a little frame underneath it which helps guide the dart pusher rod straight to feed the darts in correctly into the flywheels. But for the jam door itself, the main part I'm going to point out is there's a little electronic lock under here. Essentially what that does is controls the flywheels. So if the jam door is closed, then you can pull the flywheel trigger and the flywheels will spin. However, if it comes open, then the flywheels will disengage. So one problem I did have with this particular Hail-Fire is that the jam door had a bit of a tendency to slide open a bit too freely even when just running around. So I've put a little bit of tape over the electronic switch to help keep it depressed, so that way if the jam door did come open by accident then it wasn't too much of a headache, but also the tape does help hold this in position a little bit better as well. The last major part I'll point out is the actual dart pusher tooth. It's actually got a little spring inside it to help push it up when it's returning after firing a dart, and then when it gets to this position it moves back down ready to push the next dart in place. I tried a couple of modifications to either extend it frontwards or downwards to help feed darts in a little bit cleaner. That was before I discovered what to do with this section. It's got a little plastic nub on the end, but I actually recommend leaving this area entirely alone. It gave me a lot more headaches than it was worth to actually modify it and then have to go back and reset it. So you can effectively ignore that little tip on the end. That's just a patch-up job, so to speak. I highly recommend trying this part before doing anything else in case this doesn't work, but this is the main part that I will focus on in just a moment. I will quickly show you what you need to do to get in here, and then I'll stop the video because it's a bit hard to do it one-handed or while the camera's going. But you need to take this screw out here first, and that will take the clip holder off, and then we can pull this entire section apart. What you do is just lift off the jam door and the frame, and then the dart pusher rod will come out if you just disengage the dart pusher trigger off that white cog, and then this will push the dart pusher rod to the left, and then it will come out freely. And that will allow you to get access to the mechanism that rotates the clip holder. Okay, so we finally have the rotation system pulled apart. Two quick mentions is to be careful not to bend or break this. That's what actually rotates the system when you pull the handle forwards and backwards. With this screw here, it's not actually the original screw it came with, it's actually a Vulcan screw. A little bit longer and a little bit thicker just to give it a bit more strength and rigidity for this part here. So the next component that I'll actually focus on primarily for this mod is this. This is what I think is called a slip clutch. It used to come apart into separate pieces, but I have glued most of it together. First of all, you need to take that screw out and this top cap pops out. There used to be a little spring in between these two parts, which is no longer really necessary, so I've just put it aside for the time being. However, these three pieces, the top teeth, bottom teeth, and then this square shaft, used to be all independent, but I used plastics super glue to fix them all together. You could use 3-day epoxy glue as well, however be very careful not to get any excess goop or lumps or anything like that in the teeth system. Otherwise, when you're trying to get this rod to move up and down freely along these teeth or ridges, then you're going to run into trouble if there's anything in the way. So that's kind of why I use the plastic super glue. It's just a lot cleaner and neater, but it's got enough strength to hold it together anyway, at least so far. Now, the two most important parts is not only just gluing these three pieces together, but also in this bottom section, the actual shaft used to be a little bit longer. It used to be a few millimeters longer this way at the actual square bit, but also on the inside, particularly where the screw port is, where the screw goes into it, that used to be a little bit longer as well. But I've essentially dremeled them down, just whittled away at it bit by bit, until it just became the right length. What the story used to be is that it was a bit too long, and what had happened is, I'll demonstrate a little bit in the video, but essentially because it was a little bit too long, it caused this part to essentially tilt like so, just a couple of millimeters, not as much as I'm making it out to be, but enough that it caused alignment issues for the dart pusher trying to push a dart from a clip into the flywheel system evenly, particularly when angling the blaster up on an angle. This tended to sag down a little bit with the weight of the clips. So by shaving this off a few millimeters, just gradually, I didn't do it all in one go, I just did bit by bit just until it was short enough so that when it fits back into there, that piece there will actually go on the outside of it, but once it was all properly assembled, there'd actually be no gap in between this clip holder and the bottom part of the Hail-Fire shell. So that essentially closed the gap and fixed any movement problems with the clip holder mechanism, and it just made it a much more tight and firm grip in between these two pieces, so whenever they were spinning or rotating, there'd be no room for error at all. Okay, just a couple of final pointers. When gluing the slip clutch parts together, make sure that you wash them thoroughly in warm soapy water beforehand just to remove any excess grease. Dry them off, apply the glue, stick them together, wait for it to set properly, and then make sure that they're firmly attached before reassembling anything. Also might help to use a little bit of grease just to re-lubricate it and make it a much smoother mechanism again. And then when putting them back together, the idea is to have this part of the rod go in between the sets of teeth, and then have this collar or cover that goes all the way around it, slide over it, and then squeeze back into position in the shell here. Speaking of which, that is why I've got some layers of electrical tape around this widened rim, just to help keep it a nice firm grip in the Hail-Fire shell, just to be absolutely certain that nothing is going to wobble around. And then the final mention is the actual reason why we're shortening that square shaft in the centre is when reattaching it to the clip holder, the goal is to make sure that there's absolutely as little gap in between the Hail-Fire shell here and the top part of the clip holder here. So you want no gap in there, and you want it to be that when you're putting the screw back into the bottom there, as you're tightening it off, that it becomes a fairly firm grip in between the two, but it's not too tight that it's going to cause problems when you're rotating it again. Okay, so I've got the Hail-Fire fully reassembled, and it's loaded with some 6-dart clips. Most of it is full of Elite darts, however one of them is with the glow-in-the-dark Raven streamlines. A couple of recommendations is that I do recommend sticking with either 6 or 12 dart clips only, not only just for reliability but also comfort and weight, because the 18 dart Stampede clips are very long and heavy. Not necessarily for the rotation mechanism, but also the fact that the spines of the 6 and 12 dart clips are a couple of millimetres thicker, so they sit in these little slots a lot more comfortably, whereas the 18 dart clips, they tend to have a bit of a problem if you accidentally bump them or you don't put them in properly. They can go on a bit of an angle. So unless you modify the clips or the holder for that purpose, then just keep an eye out for it. Drums, they do fit in okay, but I wouldn't really recommend them because, again, the weight and the size of them. It also means that when you've got a drum in here, you'd have to sacrifice this slot just for it to fit. So it's almost more worthwhile just using 6 or 12 dart clips. So that way when you click it over once, you're ready for a reload, not 2, just for one drum to swap over to another drum or clip. So on that subject as well, with rotating, as you can probably notice now, I can do it a lot quicker and a lot more reliably. Doesn't skip at all, it's a lot quicker and easier to do it. So particularly when you do use the larger clips or the heavier drums, it should still be a lot more reliable than it used to. You won't have to sort of click it forward, wait for it to stop moving, click it back, wait for it to stop moving, and then having to hold it in place or hold it up just for it to even fire. So the reliability of this has gone from what I would have rated about 15% at best up to about 90% at best, which is a huge jump. Obviously because it is still a toy and it's made of plastic rather than precision metal components, you may still notice a couple of darts not firing properly here and there, but for the majority of the reloading issues or angling it up in particular, you should not have anywhere near as many headaches, if at all. So without further ado, I'm going to do a bit of a firing test, and I'm going to try and go through them as quickly as possible, just to show you how much more reliable it is for reloading, and I hope you enjoy it. I thought it'd be prudent to demonstrate using the Hail-Fire while holding 8 Stampede 18 dart clips. Only 4 of them are loaded, 10 darts in each one. I just wanted to show how reliable it was when rotating it. So it's swinging around a lot less and definitely no rattling or resetting. However, I would still say just be a little bit slower if you're using this sort of clip setup. It's not as small or as light as using 6 or 12 dart clips, so just go easy on it so you don't break anything. That being said, it is a lot more reliable than it used to be, to the point where me and my brother would have to just manually click them around because the advancing handle was just near useless with this kind of weight. In addition, angling up is a lot more reliable. Occasionally, I might probably not fire a couple of darts, but it's a lot better than not firing anything at all. So I'll demonstrate firing 20 flat and then 20 on an angle, just to give you a bit of an idea on how it performs now. Let's see how it goes. So that was a lot of fun, and as I said, I took this to a skirmish a couple of days ago. This is actually my brother's Hail-Fire, and he used it quite a lot, and he even noticed the difference between when he first got it and when it's now modified, and he kicked a lot of butt with it, so it must have made a significant enough difference to be worthwhile modding. So that's essentially the video. I know it was really long, and if you've gotten this far without skipping anything, congratulations, you gained 10 cookies to your score. And yeah, this is Alex signing out. Thanks for watching.